What if I told you that some of the most nutritious and resilient crops you could possibly grow aren't sitting on seed company shelves, but were abandoned decades ago in favor of mass-market varieties that can't hold a candle to what your ancestors grew? Most people don't know this, but while we've been chasing hybrid tomatoes and perfect-looking vegetables, we've completely forgotten about crops that could feed a family through winter, required almost no inputs, and actually got better with neglect. These weren't just survival foods. They were staples that built entire civilizations. I've spent the last 15 years tracking down these lost varieties through seed exchanges, historical societies, and old-timers who still remember. What started as curiosity became obsession when I realized that modern agricultural research is now proving what traditional farmers knew all along. These forgotten crops often outperform modern varieties in protein content, drought tolerance, and soil building capacity. In just a few minutes, I'm going to show you a Native American root crop that produces protein-rich tubers, and later, I'll reveal the grain that contains all 9 essential amino acids and can grow in conditions that would kill wheat. If you're serious about food security, heritage varieties, and growing crops that actually make sense for small-scale production, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is where traditional wisdom meets modern homesteading, and I share varieties and techniques you won't find anywhere else. So, let's get into it. Here are 7 lost pioneer crops you should be growing, ranked from useful to absolutely game-changing. Number 7. Skirret, the forgotten sweet root. This medieval root vegetable was so prized that European monasteries maintained dedicated skirret gardens for centuries. Historical records show it was a standard crop in American colonial gardens until the 1800s, when potatoes and carrots pushed it aside. The reason skirret got forgotten is simple. It takes patience to establish and doesn't ship well, 2 things that don't work for industrial agriculture. Modern nutritional analysis reveals skirret roots contain natural sugars that don't spike blood glucose the way modern root crops do. Established skirret patches can produce for 20 to 30 years without replanting. Here's what most people miss. Skirret actually improves in flavor after frost, making it perfect for late fall harvests when other crops are done. The technique that pros use is starting from root divisions rather than seed. Plant divisions 18 inches apart in early spring, mulch heavily, and ignore them for the first year while they establish. Harvest begins in year 2, taking only the largest roots and leaving smaller ones to multiply. But here's the thing about skirret that makes it special. Medieval cooks knew something we've forgotten about winter sweetness. When other root vegetables turn starchy and bland in cold storage, skirret becomes sweeter and more complex. The cold actually converts starches to sugars, creating a natural candy that could satisfy sweet cravings when honey was precious and sugar didn't exist. Modern science has caught up in a dramatic way. Research shows skirret contains inulin, the same prebiotic fiber found in expensive health supplements. This means it feeds beneficial gut bacteria while providing steady energy without blood sugar spikes. Compare that to modern carrots, which have been bred for appearance and shipping, not nutrition. The Lazy Pro technique is treating skirret like asparagus. Plant once, harvest for decades. The roots spread slowly underground, creating a permanent food source that gets better with age. You can harvest selectively, taking what you need while leaving the patch to expand. Try doing that with annual vegetables. Think of it as nature's candy cane that's been waiting underground for you to rediscover what medieval cooks knew about winter sweetness. Number 6. Groundnut, the native protein powerhouse. Long before Europeans arrived, Native American tribes from Canada to Georgia cultivated Apios americana as a primary protein source. Archaeological evidence shows groundnut cultivation sites dating back over 1,000 years. Early colonists survived harsh winters on groundnut stores, with some historical accounts crediting it with preventing starvation at Plymouth Colony. Here's why it works. Modern analysis shows groundnut tubers contain 17% protein, 3 times higher than potatoes, with a complete amino acid profile. Established patches can produce substantial yields per square foot. But here's the thing. Groundnut is actually a nitrogen-fixing legume that improves soil while producing food. Plant tubers 6 inches deep and 12 inches apart along fence lines or trellises in spring. The vines need support and will climb 6 to 8 feet. Harvest tubers in fall after vines die back, but leave some to multiply. This wasn't random cultivation, it was intentional polyculture. Native growers often planted groundnut with corn and squash, creating a 3-crop system that built soil fertility while maximizing nutrition per acre. The groundnut vines climbed the corn stalks, fixed nitrogen for all 3 crops, and produced protein-rich tubers underground, while corn provided carbohydrates and squash added vitamins and minerals. Modern science has caught up in a dramatic way. University studies confirm that groundnut tubers contain lysine, an essential amino acid that's deficient in most plant proteins. When combined with corn, groundnut creates a complete protein that rivals meat for biological value. Indigenous peoples figured this out through generations of observation, creating a sustainable protein system that modern agriculture is just beginning to understand. The reason groundnut got forgotten is simple. It doesn't fit industrial agriculture models that depend on annual planting, uniforms, harvest timing, and mechanical processing. But for homesteaders who want perennial protein production, those aren't problems. They're advantages. Here's what most people miss about growing groundnuts. They're actually easier to establish than potatoes, and more productive than beans once mature. The first year focuses on root establishment. Year 2 brings modest tuber production. By year 3, you're harvesting pounds of protein-rich tubers from each plant, and the patch keeps expanding naturally. Think of it as nature's protein bar that's been hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to rediscover what indigenous farmers knew about sustainable nutrition. Number 5. Sunchoke, the diabetes-fighting tuber. Jerusalem artichokes, despite their name, are neither from Jerusalem nor related to artichokes. They're native North American sunflowers that indigenous peoples cultivated for their crisp, nutty tubers. French explorers took them back to Europe in the 1600s, where they became a staple crop until the potato craze pushed them aside. Modern science has caught up in a dramatic way. Clinical studies show sunchoke tubers contain inulin, a prebiotic fiber that helps regulate blood sugar and feeds beneficial gut bacteria. Diabetic research indicates regular sunchoke consumption can improve insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism. Here's what most people miss about growing sunchokes. They're practically indestructible once established. Plant tubers 4 inches deep in spring, and they'll produce 8-foot-tall sunflower-like plants by summer. Each plant can yield 2 to 3 pounds of tubers that store in the ground all winter. The Lazy Pro technique is planting them as a living fence or windbreak. They'll spread naturally and provide both privacy screening and food production with zero maintenance. Harvest tubers as needed from fall through early spring. They actually get sweeter after cold exposure. But here's the thing that makes sunchokes revolutionary for modern homesteaders. While other root crops require careful storage and processing, sunchokes store themselves. Leave them in the ground and harvest fresh tubers whenever you need them, even in the middle of winter. The tubers don't rot or go dormant. They just wait there, getting sweeter with each freeze-thaw cycle, Modern nutritional research reveals something indigenous peoples knew instinctively. Sunchokes contain a type of carbohydrate that doesn't spike blood sugar like potatoes or other starchy tubers. The inulin content actually helps regulate glucose metabolism, making sunchokes a perfect food for diabetics or anyone trying to maintain stable energy levels. The reason sunchokes got forgotten is simple. They don't store well above ground and can become aggressive spreaders if not managed. Industrial agriculture needs crops that ship well and stay contained. But for homestead-scale production, those aren't problems. Fresh harvested sunchokes taste completely different from anything you can buy in stores. They're crisp, sweet, and nutty, with none of the mushiness that comes from storage and transport. Here's the technique that pros use for managing sunchoke patches. Plant them where you want a permanent food forest or along property boundaries where spreading is actually beneficial. Harvest heavily each fall, too. Control expansion, but always leave some tubers to regenerate. A well-managed sunchoke patch can feed a family indefinitely with minimal input. Think of it as nature's underground pantry that's been waiting to solve your food storage problems while improving your health. Number 4. Amaranth, the Aztec superfood. Amaranth was so central to Aztec civilization that it played a role in religious ceremonies alongside corn and beans. Spanish conquistadors discouraged amaranth cultivation, contributing to its decline in the Americas. What survived did so in remote mountain villages, where indigenous peoples continued growing it. Here's why it works nutritionally. Amaranth grain contains all 9 essential amino acids, making it a complete protein rare in the plant kingdom. Modern research has studied amaranth for its exceptional nutritional density and storage stability. But here's the thing about growing amaranth. It thrives in conditions that stress other crops. Plant seeds after soil warms in late spring, barely covering them since they need light to germinate. Amaranth actually produces better in poor soils and drought conditions than in rich, irrigated ground. The technique that pros use is succession planting every 3 weeks through summer for continuous harvest. Young leaves work as cooking greens. Mature plants produce massive seed heads that can yield 1 to 2 pounds of grain per plant. Harvest when seed heads feel firm, but before seeds start dropping. Modern agricultural research shows amaranth can produce substantial yields with minimal inputs, often outperforming wheat in marginal growing conditions. But here's what makes amaranth truly revolutionary. It's essentially 3 crops in one plant. Young leaves harvest like spinach, providing fresh greens through summer. Mature seed heads produce protein-rich grain for winter storage. Even the stems are edible when young, adding bulk to stir-fries and soups. Here's what most people miss about amaranth cultivation. This plant evolved in harsh mountain conditions, where other grains fail completely. Too much water, too much fertilizer, or too much attention actually reduces yields. The best amaranth grows on neglect, making it perfect for busy homesteaders or areas with unpredictable rainfall. The reason amaranth got forgotten is simple. It doesn't fit industrial milling equipment designed for wheat, and the tiny seeds require different harvesting techniques than commodity grains. But for homestead-scale production, those aren't problems. You can harvest amaranth by cutting seed heads into buckets, then thresh by rubbing dried heads between your hands. The grain stores for years without processing and can be ground into flour, popped like popcorn, or cooked like rice. Modern science has caught up in a dramatic way. University extension services now recommend amaranth for climate change adaptation because it maintains yields when rainfall becomes unpredictable. Some varieties mature in just 60 to 90 days, making them perfect for short growing seasons or late plantings when other grains would fail. Think of it as the ultimate survival crop that's been waiting in exile for you to rediscover what ancient civilizations knew about nutritional security. If you're finding value in these forgotten crops, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed because we're just getting to the really amazing ones. The next 3 crops could literally transform how you think about food production. Number 3, Good King Henry, the perennial spinach. This European native was valued in medieval times and earned royal status in its common name. English colonists brought Good King Henry to America, where it became a standard dooryard crop for 200 years. Every farmhouse had a patch growing near the kitchen door for year-round greens until annual vegetables became fashionable in the late 1800s. Here's what most people miss. Good King Henry is a true perennial vegetable that produces edible shoots, leaves, and flower buds from the same plant for decades. Established plants can yield fresh greens from early spring through late fall, with young shoots harvested like asparagus in spring. Modern nutritional analysis reveals leaves contain higher levels of iron, calcium, and vitamins than modern spinach varieties. The plant also accumulates minerals from deep in the soil through its extensive root system, concentrating nutrition that shallow-rooted annuals can't access. The Lazy Pro technique is treating it like asparagus. Plant once and harvest for 20 to 30 years. Start plants from seed in flats, then transplant to permanent beds 18 inches apart. Mulch heavily, and let plants establish for 1 full year before harvesting. After that, cut young shoots in spring, harvest leaves through summer, and even eat the flower buds like broccoli. But here's the thing that makes Good King Henry revolutionary for modern homesteaders. While annual greens require replanting, soil preparation, and constant attention every season, Good King Henry just keeps producing. The deep taproot brings up minerals from subsoil layers, actually improving the nutrition of surrounding plants through leaf drop and root decay. Modern science has caught up in a dramatic way. Research shows perennial vegetables like Good King Henry sequester more carbon in soil than annual crops, while requiring fewer inputs and producing higher nutrition per square foot over time. The extensive root system also prevents erosion and improves soil structure, creating benefits that extend far beyond food production. The reason Good King Henry got forgotten is simple. It doesn't fit industrial agriculture models that depend on annual replanting and uniform harvest timing. Seed companies can't sell new packets every year if customers grow perennial vegetables. But for homesteaders who want maximum nutrition with minimum effort, that's exactly what makes it valuable. Here's the technique that pros use for maximizing Good King Henry production. Establish plants in rich, well-drained soil with morning sun and afternoon shade. The first year, let plants grow without harvesting to build strong root systems. Starting in year 2, harvest young shoots in spring when they're 6 to 8 inches tall. Cut leaves throughout summer, taking no more than 1/3 of the plant at any time. In fall, let plants go to seed to maintain vigor. The versatility is what made Good King Henry so valuable to our ancestors. Spring shoots taste like asparagus and can be steamed, grilled, or added to omelets. Summer leaves work like spinach in any recipe, but with more complex mineral flavors. Flower buds harvest like broccoli and add protein to the mix. One plant provides 3 different vegetables across 3 seasons, year after year. Think of it as nature's perpetual salad bar that's been waiting to eliminate your need for store-bought greens forever. Number 2, Tepary beans, the desert survivors. Tepary beans sustained southwestern tribes for over 5,000 years in regions where other crops failed completely. These small, dense beans were so crucial to desert survival that Tohono O'odham and Hopi peoples developed dozens of varieties adapted to specific microclimates and rainfall patterns. Modern science has caught up in a dramatic way. Agricultural research shows Tepary beans can produce full crops on as little as 2 to 3 inches of rainfall per season. That's less water than it takes to germinate corn. Nutritional analysis reveals they contain 30% protein and cook faster than common beans while providing superior mineral content. But here's the thing that makes Teparis revolutionary. They actually prefer poor, alkaline soils that kill other legumes. Plant them after soil warms in late spring, 4 inches apart in rows. They need no irrigation in most climates and no fertilizer. Excess nitrogen actually reduces yields. The technique that pros use is treating them like a desert crop, even in humid climates. Plant in raised beds or slopes where water drains quickly, and resist the urge to water or fertilize. Tepary beans have evolved to thrive on neglect and will outproduce pampered garden beans in drought years. University Extension Services now recommend Tepary beans for climate change adaptation because they maintain yields when rainfall becomes unpredictable. Some varieties mature in just 60 to 90 days, making them perfect for short growing seasons or late plantings. Here's what most people miss about Tepary bean cultivation. These plants evolved in harsh desert conditions where survival meant maximum nutrition from minimum resources. The beans are smaller than common varieties, but they're incredibly dense with protein, minerals, and complex carbohydrates. A cup of cooked Tepary beans provides more usable nutrition than a cup of any other legume. Modern agricultural research reveals something indigenous peoples knew through generations of selection. Tepary beans contain compounds that help regulate blood sugar and provide sustained energy without the crashes associated with simple carbohydrates. The protein profile is nearly complete, missing only small amounts of amino acids that are abundant in corn and squash. The reason Tepary beans got forgotten is simple. Industrial agriculture favors large, uniform beans that look good in packages and cook predictably in commercial processing. Tepary beans are small, mottled, and require different cooking techniques than standard varieties. But for homesteaders dealing with climate uncertainty, those aren't problems. They're exactly the traits that make Teparis valuable. Here's the technique that pros use for maximizing Tepary bean production in any climate. Choose well-drained soil and plant after all danger of frost has passed. Space plants closer than common beans since they stay smaller and bushier. Avoid overhead, watering, which can promote fungal diseases. Harvest when pods are dry and brittle, usually 90 to 100 days from planting. The versatility is what made Tepary beans so crucial to desert peoples. They can be ground into flour for flatbreads, cooked whole like any bean, or even eaten raw when young and tender. The cooking time is actually shorter than common beans, and they hold their shape better in soups and stews. Some varieties have sweet, nutty flavors that work well in both savory and sweet dishes. This wasn't random adaptation. It was intentional selection over millennia for the ultimate survival crop. Indigenous farmers chose varieties that would produce food even in years when other crops failed completely, creating a genetic treasure trove of drought tolerance and nutritional density. Think of it as nature's insurance policy that's been waiting in the desert for you to discover what drought-adapted agriculture really means. Number 1. Grain Amaranth, the complete nutrition revolution. While I mentioned amaranth earlier for its leaves, grain amaranth deserves the top spot for its revolutionary potential as a complete nutrition source. This is the crop that could change everything about how we think about food security and sustainable agriculture. Here's the historical context that will blow your mind. Grain Amaranth once fed the entire Aztec Empire. It was so central to their civilization that Spanish colonizers recognized its importance and discouraged its cultivation, contributing to its decline. Modern nutritional science has validated what the Aztecs knew. Amaranth grain contains all 9 essential amino acids in ratios that nearly match human requirements. Research has confirmed it as one of the most nutritionally complete foods on Earth, with protein quality scores higher than milk or eggs. But here's what makes grain amaranth absolutely game-changing for modern homesteaders. It can produce substantial amounts of complete protein per acre, depending on variety and conditions. That's more usable protein per square foot than many other crops you can grow. The technique that pros use is selecting the right variety for grain production. Plant Love Lies Bleeding, or Plainsman varieties, after soil warms to 65 degrees, in rows 18 inches apart. Thin plants to 6 inches, spacing once established. The key is letting plants fully mature. Grain heads should feel firm, and seeds should fall easily when rubbed. Here's why it works for food. Security. Amaranth grain stores for years without processing can be ground into flour, popped like popcorn, or cooked like rice. One mature plant can produce 1 to 2 pounds of grain that contains more nutrition than 10 pounds of wheat. Modern agricultural research is now scrambling to reintroduce amaranth as climate change makes traditional grains less reliable. Universities are developing mechanical harvesters and processing equipment because they finally understand what we lost when we abandoned this crop. But here's the thing that makes grain amaranth truly revolutionary. It's not just about the nutrition, though that alone would justify growing it. It's about the complete sustainability of the system. Amaranth improves soil while producing food, requires no external inputs, and actually yields better under stress conditions that would devastate wheat or corn. The reason grain amaranth got forgotten is simple. It doesn't fit industrial milling equipment designed for wheat, and hand harvesting doesn't work for commodity agriculture. But for homestead-scale production, those aren't problems. They're advantages. You can harvest amaranth with simple tools, process it by hand, and store it indefinitely without refrigeration or chemical preservatives. Here's what most people miss about grain amaranth production. The plants are incredibly beautiful, growing 6 to 8 feet tall with massive, colorful seed heads that look like something from an alien planet. Red varieties produce burgundy, plumes that rival any ornamental plant, while still producing pounds of edible grain. You can have food production that doubles as landscape design. Modern science has caught up in a dramatic way. Research shows amaranth grain contains squalene, a compound usually found in expensive skincare products, along with tocotrienols, powerful antioxidants that protect against heart disease and cancer. The mineral content is off the charts, with more calcium than milk, more iron than spinach, and more potassium than bananas. The technique that pros use for maximizing grain production is understanding that amaranth responds to day length, not just temperature. Plant timing affects final yields more than soil fertility or water availability. In most climates, planting in late May to early June produces the largest seed heads and highest grain yields. Here's the processing technique that makes grain amaranth practical for homesteaders. Cut mature seed heads when about 75% of seeds fall easily when rubbed. Hang heads in a dry, ventilated area for 2 weeks. Thresh by rubbing heads over a screen or beating them in a large container. Winnow by pouring grain between containers in a light breeze to separate seeds from chaff. The versatility is what made grain amaranth so valuable to ancient civilizations. The grain can be ground into flour that works in any recipe calling for wheat flour, though it creates denser, more nutritious baked goods. It can be popped like popcorn for a crunchy snack that's higher in protein than any commercial cereal. Cooked whole, it creates a porridge or pilaf that provides complete nutrition in a single dish. This wasn't random cultivation. It was intentional development over thousands of years of the perfect survival food. Indigenous farmers created varieties that would produce maximum nutrition with minimum inputs, creating a genetic legacy that modern science is just beginning to understand. Think of it as nature's perfect food that's been waiting 500 years for you to rediscover what the Aztecs knew about true nutritional independence. The real insight here isn't just about individual crops. It's about understanding that our ancestors weren't growing these plants by accident. They were solving problems we're just now realizing we have: climate uncertainty, soil depletion, and nutritional deficiency. If this opened your eyes to what we've lost in modern agriculture, hit that like button. Drop a comment below and tell me which crop surprised you the most. Are you Team Groundnut for the protein power, Team Tepary beans for the drought tolerance, or Team Grain Amaranth for the complete nutrition? Make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell for notifications, because I'm constantly tracking down more lost varieties and forgotten techniques that could revolutionize your homestead. Remember, sometimes the most powerful crops aren't in the glossy seed catalogs. Sometimes they're in the stories of your great-grandmother's garden, just waiting for you to rediscover what real food security looks like.